¿Qué tal, gente? This video has been pending since April 21st, but as promised, let's review Class of Heroes 1 and 2G. Back when I released that video, I made several predictions because I knew about other acquired games, and I am happy to say that out of the 6 things I talk about, I was slightly off about one of them. Throughout the video I'll be pointing those things, and don't worry, I won't spoil the game in case you are interested. Without further ado, let's discuss their story, gameplay, graphics, and music. Class of Heroes 1 begins explaining that decades ago, paths appeared, and that changed the world. The term path is pretty much used as a labyrinth. Ironically, what I mean about labyrinths is just a deeper part of these so-called paths. And as you are a new student, the task is simple: study so you can tackle these places like a great adventurer. For somewhere around 10 hours into the game, that is going to be all the background you will have at hand, because this is a quest-driven game, so you cannot move forward unless you complete some request. Before that, we could say that you are going to have idle chatter, like slightly getting to know some side characters, your teacher Yuno, and that's it. Most of the conversations are related to the problems they have as students or teachers, having to gather random items, so there is not that much point talking about these things. The game will take its course once you get a chance to explore the first labyrinth, where you find another person who also seems to be a student. She will speak several times about the dangers inside of the labyrinths, but as good as students you are, well, you will keep moving forward, until she once again says that these places are going to become much more dangerous. In another expedition you find her fighting another person, but because of you, this new girl in the scene escapes. Later on you find another similar character deep into another labyrinth, girl who's not going to give you the chance to invade that place. After a small battle, another character appears into scene, the Moria, character who also fights our mysterious girl. But at the mid of the conflict, your party and her get transferred back into the academy, where Yuno will recognize our mysterious girl as Nina, her lost sister. As for Class of Heroes 2G, it begins in the exact same way, but this is the point where I was slightly off in my predictions. Yeah, its story is lighthearted, but it was way better than the first game. Heck, even I laughed a couple of times. But this story took a better direction as you reach the second half of the game, where once again you find a mysterious student, and both the stories get linked, and the ending from the first game starts to make sense. And in all honesty, I was enjoying that part of the story. Prior to that, it is a bit trivial between random student-teacher moments, where they use some classic Japanese comedy, so keep that in mind. The story has some serious moments, but they are like 5–10%. As for the first game, I cannot really say that I enjoyed it that much. Sure, there are some dumb circumstances that I enjoyed, but compared with the second game, Class of Heroes 1 falls short. Something I really appreciated in 2G is the voice acting, because it was really good, with some characters like Rosie, Bisco, and Sfolia, that some of these skits are still memorable. I will give them a 6 and an 8. Gameplay-wise, both games are first-person dungeon crawlers, where you either use some pre-created characters or enroll your team. Here's where I can say I was right with the prediction about alignment, but this one got a bit further and annoying, because if you do not have a particular alignment, you cannot choose some majors, which is the equivalent of a job, but you also need some specific stats, and gender, as well as species. So they took an interesting idea but added so many mechanics in between, that from here I already knew that it was going to be convoluted, gimmicky, and probably a bit annoying. You can reclass characters whenever you want, transferring magics in between, at least in the first game. But you need to cover the previous requirements I mentioned, otherwise, well, you cannot reclass, and even once I understood all the previous points, I didn't give a flying fork and created my team however the heck I wanted. I knew I was going to regret it, but I play these games for the creativity, not for efficiency or stuff like that. The second game is where it had much more interesting ideas, but its execution got way worse in my opinion, because each school has majors, so you cannot reclass your characters unless you accomplish the previous requirements and having reached the respective school, which is more than obvious that I didn't, so I got stuck with my party as it is the whole game. But what could have been an extraordinary opportunity failed as a big hindrance, because it would have been cooler if, for example, you create a warrior Bahamut and then, let's say, reclass it into a Dragon Knight, once you reach the respective school where this major is available. But nah, probably it was something about the alignment, because my character didn't have bad stats, so be my guest, I wasn't able to reclass her. Just keep in mind that reclassing characters helps to add much more extra HP, That is the main purpose. The skills that each major has are extra bonuses depending from your team. In Class of Heroes 1, as you explore the paths, you will have to tread really slow, because enemies beat the heck out of you really good. Each path has some random floors, so unless you have the map of the area or a mage with map art, you will move blindly, which is the worst idea, because not so long you will find floors that dispel magic and turn you around. So unless you have a freaking good sense of direction or tickets to get out of the labyrinth, you're literally screwed. It happened to me a couple of times and it turns into terrible situations, so always try to get a map of the areas you are going to visit, to avoid that kind of circumstances, or move with 2 mages, so you can recast map or get out of the labyrinth in case things turn sour. Also try to have a character able to fly, or with items to fly, otherwise this is what's going to happen to you a lot of times. Yeah, these games are gimmicky, so you have to balance your team quite well. As for the loot tables, I felt they were all over the place. Sometimes I was really lucky and sometimes unlucky as heck, but what made me curse a bit this game is that you find random items that have to be identified, otherwise you have no idea what they are. But also you need specific materials and the know-how to create weapons. Once again, in paper interesting idea but poor execution, so I created like 4 items in my whole adventure. In the second game at least you know what you got since the beginning, so you can toss everything into your vault or sell what you don't need. Once again, I only created like 6 items and that's it. I didn't feel the need to go out of my way to start creating new equipment, because you can buy some powerful equipment along the way. And to finish this section, let's talk about the random encounters and bosses. I had a basic idea of what was going to happen. I mean, Acquire likes Wizardry, and they didn't disappoint because this game feels like the first Wizardry, where you can get ambushed so many times that it feels like the game is trying to annoy you as much as possible, and in every way possible, so literally you can change floors and start to feel the difficulty spike, where in the late game I was missing so many attacks, or the enemies can literally destroy your whole team. Now extrapolate the same effect to the bosses. In the first game, there are some bosses that appear in the worst places, where you have no idea if there is a boss, and in spaces where you cannot use magic attacks. In Class of Heroes 2G is where I felt that the game is much more balanced regarding random encounters and bosses. Sure, you will reach some areas where enemies are going to be tough, but I never felt they were that unforgiving, and bosses for a change of pace were exciting for me. I will give them a 6 and an 8. In the graphics section I usually talk about some technical things like glitches, FPS, the general creativity and enemy design. Issues that I saw while playing is that some sprites were not changed, so the characters look pixelated. At least these are the ones I caught while playing. Another issue the game had at first but later fits is that while looking at the map it was hard to catch the limits on the map, because they were brown. But a hotfix the past week changed these limits to red, which helps a lot. In 2G there are some options in the wrong position, while managing your team in one of the schools. And there are also some confusing moments where characters ask for items that end up being another thing. Aside from that, I had no technical issues or the game magically closing itself. As for the creativity and general execution, it was quite interesting to see the character design and a school topic. Where these games fall real short is when we jump into the dungeons, because in the first game you will see the same background a lot, and when I mean a lot, it's like 90% of the time, turning the experience stagnant. 2G improved on that matter, because there are some areas that begin in one way, but as you reach deeper parts within those labyrinths, they change, as if you are actually moving forward. Where once again, the game can turn stagnant is with the enemy design. You will see the same sprites a lot of time, with some slight changes in color. Then again, the second game improves a bit more that diversity, but not to a point where I can say damn. I will give them another 6 and a 7.5. And last but not least, the music. In the first game everything could be reduced to electronic, which fits for the most part quite well, until you get into a labyrinth, because for some reason they decided to have them silent. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some games that have similar executions, but there is a constant wind blowing or the game setting is close to that kind of ambience, even sometimes with creepy music. But here they just added background noises, which feels completely off because it is not like you are getting chased or finding that sort of enemy. Heck, even the kind of game setting. The second game, unfortunately, is not different on this front. Fortunately, what they did cool is that the general OST improved a lot, diving a bit more into electronic or with some orchestral arrangements, and the boss tracks are way better. I will give them another 6 and an 8. Class of Heroes 1 and 2G final scores are 6 and 7.8. From these two entries, the second game is where they improved a lot of things, while keeping the same premise. The first game is not bad, but to be honest, I wouldn't recommend it to a lot of people, unless you are interested about really old school approaches in RPGs. While the second game has the same premise, the general experience is much more polished, where I could definitely recommend it to a wider audience. Yeah, it's a hard game in some moments, but not annoyingly unforgiving. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.